This is the primordial wave, and I am the Enwisdomizer. So what happened after Alexander the Great, son of Philip of Macedon from Greece, conquered the great holy sacred land of the Pharaohs in Africa and Egypt, to be precise? That conquest was to be the determining factor of African fall. But before that conquest, Africa was already weakened. And when I say Africa, of course, I'm talking of ancient Egyptian civilization. Before the final conquest of Alexander the Great, Africa has already been weakened militarily, politically, and economically. And that made it possible for this vandal, this vagabond to conquer Africa with ease. Because if ancient Egypt was in her prime, Greece would not dream of daring to challenge Africa or to daring to march their Hellenic boat into Africa, because African soldiers were well trained, Egyptian soldiers were brilliant, and they were strong enough in antiquities, and they defended the land of Africa very well. So what made it possible for Alexander the Great to conquer Africa was because there had been several other conquests before. There had been several other conquests. For instance, there were the Assyrians. Even before the Assyrians, there were the Hyksos. The Hyksos were in Africa before trying to take over the land. And the Egyptians decided to drive them out of Egypt, out of Africa. And many scholars are telling us that it was this expulsion of the Hyksos that was documented in the Bible as the Exodus, right? Because these Hyksos, called the foreign rulers, were in Egypt for many, many years. And they were trying to dominate, they were trying to take over the entire Pharaohic system, right? And Africans realized this, and they said, well, these visitors, these wanderers, we've given opportunity to be in our land, we're trying to take over our land. And then they gathered their military forces and drove them out. And as I said, do your own research. Many scholars believe that it was this expulsion that was documented in the Bible as the Exodus, right? Okay, so after the Hyksos, we know that the Assyrians were also in Egypt. The Assyrians conquered Egypt, right? The Egyptians struggled with the Assyrians. And anyone who studies history very well knows that the Assyrians were beasts when it came to militarism. They're very strong. To fight the Assyrians, when the Assyrians brought war to your homeland, you know that you have really a dirty war to fight, because they were strong, because they had advanced weapons, right? So Egyptians, and when I say Egyptians, I'm talking of Africans, because we have been so programmed to believe that the current people who dwell in the land of Egypt today, the white Arabs who live in Egyptian society today, were the descendants of ancient Egyptians. No, these people who are currently called Egyptian today were not indigenous to the land. They came as a result of Arab invasion. When Mohammedan religion began to spread, especially during the 6th, 7th, 8th century AD, we know that these people you call the Tunisians, the Moroccans, the Egyptians, in fact, all those people who are fair-skinned, white people who live in the in the northern part of Africa, were not indigenous to the land. In antiquities, in ancient time, what we have all over Africa are black people, black indigenous people. So when I say Egyptians, when I say Africans, I'm using both terminologies to mean one thing, and that is that ancient Africa was black African civilization. And in one of my videos, I did indicate that the ancient Egyptians, the original developers of the Nile River civilization, indicated as to where they came from. They told us in the papyrus of Hanefa, right? They say we came from the foothill of the mountains of the moon, where the god Happy dwells. And the foothill of the mountains of the moon is located where? In East Africa, right? Uganda, Tanzania, there are mountain ranges, the Kilimanjaro areas. That was what they describe as where their ancestors came from, the Egyptians, which means these were Negroids. But if you watch movies today, if you read books, if you read the Bible, these books and cinematographies are used as a mind control of the people. So people don't really think that ancient Egyptian civilization was an African civilization, but indeed, it was an African civilization. It's been taken away from Africans and other people. Just as in antiquities, the Greek people had this neurotic obsession about Africa. They have this neurotic obsession about anything in Africa. You know, if you read a classical literatures, is full of allusions that their ancestors came from Africa, the ancestors of the Greek people, the founders of the great cities, Athens, and many other cities came from Africa. So that obsession, as we can see, continues in this modern time. Because, as I said, following Alexander the Great's conquest, what do we see? From that moment when Greece fell from power, Rome took over from Greece. And we see that the Romans were also neurotically obsessed with Africa. You know, they landed in Africa, they invaded Africa, they plagiarized, they stole as much as they could. After the Romans, you know, what they call the modern Western society began to rise in power. And we see that the French, under Napoleon Bonaparte, also marched his army into Africa, conquered Egypt, right? Stole with his intellectuals and scholars. They stole as many things as they wanted to, including the dead bodies of African ancestors. Who does that? Who does that? Because the Western society tends to be very materialistic in perception of the world, in perception of phenomena, in perception of the universe. They tend to be very, what they call scientific. It's very kind of materialistic point of view, which is very antithetical to an African concept. Even in this modern time, Africa has in fact, every African society has this ritualistic, understanding, ritualistic and respect to the dead people. In some societies, it will take up to 1 year to mourn the dead, to bury the dead, to intern the dead people, right? And for Indo-Europeans to go to Africa and continue to violate, to corrupt, to steal the bodies of dead pharaohs, right? In the African mind, this is an abomination. This is unimaginable. You don't know that people think like that. You go to the grave and then you steal the dead pharaohs and you go to the museum and you put it there. To an African mind, this is unimaginable. You don't do that. You don't do that. Anyway, so what we're trying to say was that the conquest of Alexander the Great opened the floodgate for many future subsequent domination of Africa by the Indo-Europeans, including the Arabs. So I'm going to share a screen, and I'll try to make this as brief as possible. I would not like to prolong it more than necessary. Right? Okay. So this is the picture of Alexander the Great. I don't even know why they call this guy Alexander the Great, because I don't think he did great things. He had this psychology of, I want to conquer the whole world. I want a world conquest. For what? What do you want to conquer the world for? Can you just be in your own territory and be happy? Right? And he went around pillaging, spilling blood, killing, vandalizing, raping, pilfering, stealing, right? Wherever he conquers, he killed the men, and then his soldiers went into women and have children from them. And they start a new city. And that's how even they named a place in Egypt called Alexandria. Still bears his name, Alexandria. And I sincerely think that any soul within this physical incarnation that just want to go around and start killing and vandalizing and raping and destroying is a low evolved consciousness, is an unspiritual consciousness, is a soul trapped within the thinking of the thought density mindset, right? So that soul is immature. That soul is beastly. That soul is literally not evolved, because an advanced evolved soul will not reason that way. So I wrote here, Hellenism officially enthroned in Egypt following Alexander the Great conquest of ancient land of the pharaohs. Hellenism, the Greek culture, was officially enthroned in Egypt, right? So we know that the Greek army were highly trained. They were disciplined because they lived in these microcosmic city-states that were more like a small communist-driven establishment, right? That's how they lived. And men lived together in a purely communistic way. And the military were well trained. But as I said, the reason they were able to march their Hellenic soldiers into Africa and conquer this land was because Egypt was already weak at this point. You know, the invasion of the Hyksos, the invasion of the Assyrians, and then the Persians also in the 500 BC invaded Africa. So it was just easy for them they just walked in and monopolized and conquered and colonized ancient Egypt. And because that has been, if you read Greek classical literature, Greek people had always been so obsessed with ancient Africa, very obsessed. And throughout antiquity, we see that the Egyptians did not really give them access. The Africans were very skeptical of Indo-Europeans stepping into their land, and they were very restrictive as to who comes into Africa. So when they had the opportunity, they took it by force. They took it by force by bringing their soldier and conquering and dominating, and then bringing the Hellenic Hellenic civilization into Egypt. Right. And I wrote here, in 332 BC, after defeating the Persians, Alexander the Great proceeded to take over Egypt militarily. He initiated the official era of barbarian Hellenism. Egyptian mystery system came under Indo-European virtualization. This is my focus. The Egyptian mystery school, the Egyptian esoteric school, the Egyptian philosophies, the Egyptian knowledge was virtualized. Virtual, the feeding, because Egypt was almost, dying at that point. The vultures from the Hellenic vultures stepped in and helped to destroy and to destroy the already dying culture, because that had been their obsession throughout all antiquities, right? They saw a little window of opportunity and they took it so fast. So if you're like me, you like to understand the mindset of this kind of people who want to conquer the whole world. For what? What is it in you that is inferior that you want to conquer somebody to feel important? You don't need to conquer anyone to feel important. You can just be in your own territory and then be happy. But there are certain inner sense of inferiority, actually, that makes somebody to be this brutal to feel important. You need to conquer the world to feel important. You are important by yourself. You don't need to do that. But unfortunately, that's how the world works. So this book by Michael Borgan is very important when understanding Alexander the Great. The book is titled Alexander the Great, World Conqueror. I think it should be renamed Alexander the Barbarian, honestly, because he did not do great things. So now Greece invaded Africa and they dominate. Many years later, after Alexander the Great had died, there was this Library of Alexandria. The Library of Alexandria was a warehouse of ancient information. It was a place where there was collections of advanced high knowledge, books, papyrus, tablets, anything you can name. We are in that library. But what happened will shock the world forever. This library was set on fire and destroyed. And I am one of those who believe that the destruction of the Library of Alexandria in Egypt and Africa was not just an accidental happenstance. It was orchestrated, it was designed, because at this point, they've conquered Egypt, and Egypt had wealth of information that the Greek people have been stealing for years, little by little. Now, their man is in charge, their man is in power, and now they were able to collect all those hidden philosophical, scientific, astrological, mathematical, all those medical information together in a warehouse, and they burned it down, right? They burned it down. Burning it down means that there were so much knowledge about Africa that was destroyed forever. We never have access to those information, right? I do not believe that it was by chance, by accident, that the Library of Alexandria was burned to the ground. No, it was intentional. Africa was being erased from history, right? The knowledge of Africa. And because of that, it's easy for people now to say that Africa never contributed anything to the world, but you guys burned down the library. You should have left that library for us to know what Africa has done. Now, the library is burned down, and then out of the knowledge they've stolen from Africa, they use it to reconstruct a new civilization in this modern time called Western civilization. And then they turn around and say, well, you guys didn't contribute anything. You should not have burned our library and our shit and our book in the first place. So I wrote here, in 48 BC, the hidden hands, the manipulators of our perceptible third-dimensional realities, in order to erase every historical fact relating to true knowledge decided to burn to the ground the great library of Alexandria. Right? Starting from this event, the great wisdom of Egypt was overthrown in a highly planned elitist agenda. As I said, I do not believe the burning of this library was not a mistake. It was not a mistaken fire, just, they would have controlled it if they wanted, but they decided to destroy it. So what happened? When they destroy it now, of course, they've plagiarized so many things that went on the ground. Some of this information they plagiarized is still being circulated in hidden secret Masonic lodges and Western secret societies. And they use those knowledge to continue to govern and to continue to rule the world, including to dominate, continue to dominate the Africans, right? So there were, when Egyptian civilization and Egyptian mystery school was destroyed by the Greek people, the final destruction, there were people who were still teaching some part, certain aspect of Egyptian knowledge, of African knowledge. And these teachings might come in the form of, for example, Neoplatonism. And there was a brilliant Alexandrian called Hypatia. Hypatia of Alexandria. She was a brilliant astronomer, a mathematician, and a Neoplatonist thinker in Alexandria, Egypt. She was murdered in 415 CE Common Era, by a mob of fanatical Christian friars or monks under the mind control of Saint Cyril. This is the picture of Saint Cyril of Alexandria. He was the main inspiration to the monks who murdered Hypatia of Alexandria. Let's read. Again, the ecclesiastical architectures of misery, the purveyors of this crime, aimed at suppressing the ancient Egyptian mystery system, which had continued in the form of Neoplatonism at the time. So, why was Hypatia killed? I believe these fanatical Christian-inspired killers probably thought that because Hypatia was teaching Neoplatonism, he was being paganistic. He was not following Christ, right? And my point is that this was another way that the status quo, the elite in power, including the ecclesiastical elite of the time, were trying to suppress every single knowledge, every single true knowledge coming from Africa, even though they were against Neoplatonism at the time. But we know that even the Gospel of St. John was full of Neoplatonic anecdotes, right? If you read the Gospel of St. John, you're going to see in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. This was purely, quote unquote, paganistic, Neoplatonic philosophy or theory or doctrine being stolen by the papacy, by the church fathers, and by the writers of the gospel, and they put it in the gospel. So why were they attacking Neoplatonists then as paganistic or as evil? I think they're just trying to cover their tracks, because if they did not burn the Library of Alexandria, we would know exactly where the Bible came from, right? We will see where they plagiarized all the information that they put in the Bible, right? We will see where they copied it from. And that's why the leaders, the rulers of the time, the controllers had to burn down this library, because it would have revealed so many things to people. And I wrote here, we were told that Jesus said, neither do men light a lamp and put it under the bushel. Instead, they put it on a lampstand where it gives off light to the whole house. But he forgot to say, however, he forgot to say, except evil men, the grand designers of the third dimensional matrix. They take away the light, true knowledge, and offer the masses darkness, i.e., dumbed down religion, ritualism, dogmas, traditionalism, and mass-driven cognitive hypnosis. The reason they were burning libraries and killing people who were teaching true knowledge in ancient time was because they wanted to suppress the original knowledge and then feed people, create a new system of religious indoctrination, right, where they control the mind of the people. And what emerged after all this chaos was the evolution and emergence of Christianity, which continues to be the dominant factors, one of the major religions in the world today. This book is something I always recommend to people who would like to read. It's called Ancient Egypt, the Light of the World by Gerald Massey. If you want to understand a lot about ancient Africa, if you want to understand the Bible, if you want to understand the history of Africa in terms of their contribution, their theological, esoteric, spiritual contribution to the world, read this book. It's quite a voluminous book, but it's worth reading. I think every African who is interested in knowing, understanding things, need to read it. And I wrote here, by the way, this writing is not a quote from this book, it's just my own writing. With the Library of Alexandria destroyed, the last vestiges of the light of the world was concealed under the bushel by the hidden puppet masters. They began to engineer a new reality based on ignorance and mass consciousness. Ancient Egypt was the light of the world. Ancient Africa was the light of the world. That is what this British man wrote in this huge book. This book is pretty huge. It exposed how ancient Egypt brought light to mankind. Right? Now, going forward, the Greek people ruled Egypt. When Greek civilization collapsed, what happened? From the ashes of this collapse of the Greek domination of the world came Rome, Imperial Roman Empire, took over the light of colonization of the world from the Greek people, right? And we see that at a certain time, Emperor Constantine became a defining figure in Christianity, right? Emperor Constantine, according to history, we are told that he was preparing for a war, civil war, with his brother-in-law, right? Because they are fighting for political power. And he claimed that he had a dream. Let me just read what I wrote here. In 312 AD, Constantine Augustus came out victorious in the famous Battle of the Milvan River, a politically driven civil war with Maxentius as the leader of the opposing side. This victory propelled Constantine as the sole ruler of the entire Roman Empire. The night before the battle, he claimed he saw in a dream the sun, which was overlaid with the symbol of the cross. Underneath it was written, "In hoc signo vince," Winces, "In hoc signal winces. In hoc signal winces. In this sign conquer. What sign is he talking about? This is what he saw. Chi rho. This in English should be P, but in Greek is R. Literally R in English it should be P, and then this is X in English, but in Greek it is Chi, right? This is the sign he saw overlaid on the cross, and underneath it, this cross was overlaid on the sun, and underneath it was written this word, in hoc signo vinces, in this sign, conquer. And from that time, this became the banner of the Imperial Roman Empire, right? This was their logo, Pax Romana, peace of Rome, right? Roman peace. They use this sign of the cross, and what this means literally is Christus, or Christ. He claimed that with this banner he saw in a dream, he instructed his soldiers to paint their armors with this sign, and then he went to war against Maxentius, the battle of the Mevan River, and he conquered. From this moment, he became so attached to Christianity, right? And he made Christianity an official Roman empire. So this man was one of the figures in history that made the global expansion of Christianity possible. Without him, I think it would have been difficult for Christianity to expand, because we know that in the Roman Empire, there were multiple other emperors who did not like Christianity, and we are told that they persecuted Christians a lot, even though some historians are saying that this idea that the Roman Empire was persecuting Christians was invented by Christians to create this pitiable sympathy towards them, that it did not actually happen as many Christian historians we're trying to describe, but that's not our topic today. So with him in power, he gave Christianity a lot of force. Bishops and popes became like demigods, right? He convened a meeting. I'm going to read what I wrote here. In 325 AD, Emperor Constantine convened the Council of Nicaea in order to discuss theological doctrinal matters. But in actuality, he was diplomatically consolidating for himself imperial powers following his brutal elimination of his political opponents. Right? Constantine understood the sign of the time. Christianity was rapidly gaining ground in Rome, so he bought the church over and utilized church leaders for his nefarious, bloody agenda. From now on, the Roman pontifical ecclesiastical regime was born. It will spread the Indo-European system of Christianity, racism, hatred of the indigenous people, slavery, and parasitic exploitation of the earth. So, going back to this sign, in hoc signo vinces, winces, in this sign conquer, and they have been conquering the world with this sign forever. And this sign means imperialism, nothing else, because Emperor Constantine was not a moral person. He wasn't a good man. He was an evil man. He was a brutal, horrible human being based on what he has done. But we see that with the Roman Empire, we see that the planet Earth was dominated. Indigenous people all over the place were repressed. They were oppressed. Christianity, when we look at Christianity from this modern time, we think it's just people praying to God. In olden days, it was by conquest. by killing, by destruction, by shedding of blood. They kill people because, quote unquote, they did not believe in Christ, you know. So it was like more like we see the Islamic world doing today, where they kill you because you don't believe in Allah. Christianity did even worse than that. But people forget history so easily. So, but who is Constantine? Who is this guy? He was a Christian thug. He was a thug. He was a bad boy of history. What did he do? He killed his son, Crispus. He killed his own biological son. That's how psychopathic this guy is, who Christians believe that he was because of him, that God was with him, that he brought Christianity into global prominence. But who was he? A satanic evil man. Anyone who killed his son, you can't even imagine killing your own biological son. What does he look like? What kind of mind will do this kind of thing? Right? He did not just kill his son, he killed his wife. And we're told that he drowned him in hot water. In hot water, his wife. He killed his brother-in-law, Licinius, and killed his brother-in-law's son. These are the ones we know, because there are other covert things we might never be told. And my point is that the church is in bed with this man. The church loved this man. When the church tells the story of Emperor Constantine, they have this romantic affection with him. They love him. They love him because, quote unquote, he is the one who made the Nicene Conference of 325 AD possible. He's the one who basically gave the bishops and the popes the power they have today to lord it over the masses, right? What people don't know is that the ecclesiastical authorities, the ecclesiastical infrastructure, the entirety of ecclesiastical infrastructure is the continuation of the imperial Roman Empire. That's why they call them Roman Catholic, Rome. I'm amazed that Christianity started in Palestine and then ended up in the Indo-European land. And the Indo-Europeans utilized it efficiently in terms of their world domination. And that is what many Africans don't seem to understand. They think that whenever you sing, let's go, everybody is singing the same song. No, Christianity was made as a tool of domination. And that is why this word here is not a good word. In hoc signo vinces, or winches. I don't speak Latin, but in hoc signo, in this sign conquer. Haven't they conquered the entire world with the sign, power, might, domination? They have. They have been ruling the entire world with this sign, subjecting everybody. And they did that by, first of all, having to burn down the great library of Alexandra. Because if they didn't burn it down, today we will know exactly where some of those theories and propositions they put in the Bible came from. So there was a reason as to where they have to destroy history to create another one. They have to destroy one history in order to build another one. Because if you didn't destroy this one, now people are going to see. It's like some great masters taught you, some professors taught you in a secret place. And for you to shine, you have to go and kill your professor so that people wouldn't know that it was that professor who taught you, right? That's exactly what happened. So now, ancient knowledge was destroyed. They persecuted people who possessed ancient light. And what happened? What was the outcome of it? The world was thrown into dark age. A dark age blindness, ignorance, miasmic ignorance dominated the world. In Europe, there was a period we called the Dark Age. Why did the Dark Age happen? Because the light of the world, ancient Egypt was destroyed, ancient African knowledge was destroyed. Many soul-freeing knowledge was hidden. Some were destroyed, and the propagators of those knowledge were killed, and then now you give the Bible in the hands of many people who don't understand the astro-mythological construct in the Bible. Now they read it literally, and they think that the literal story they are reading in the Bible is actually a factual historical event. You see, you've blinded people forever. Just like, for instance, people read the story of Samson and Delilah. They think these were actual history. These were actual people, not knowing that these were astro-theology, astro-mythology. Astro has to do with the stars. They are studying the constellation. Samson is Shamash, right? In Hebrew language, Shamash. And when also we study the other ancient terminologies, we see that Shamash means the sun, the sun. What is Delilah? Delilah is ancient language for the planet Venus. So they are talking of two astrological events, and they anthropomorphized it. They made it to look like they are talking of actual people. So how can you convince people that when they read Samson and Delilah, they're not talking of people? They're talking of space bodies, the sun and the planet Venus, because the planet Venus in ancient time is called what? Delilah. Samson is Shamash, right? Now, something happened. Even though they destroyed ancient Egyptian knowledge, they wanted to destroy ancient Egyptian knowledge, and they hid most of the knowledge in their underground secret societies, right, where they use the knowledge to dominate and rule the world. Still, ancient Egyptian religion continued to morph, continued to pop out in different ways. And some of those ways are Neoplatonism. Whenever you see this word, Neoplatonism came from ancient Egyptian knowledge. So they are still talking about Africa. Whenever you see this Hermeticism is still a knowledge, an esoteric knowledge coming from ancient Egyptian mystery school. How about Gnosticism? Still the same thing, even though the church was very, very brutal in suppressing the Gnostics during his heyday. The church ecclesiastical authorities and church fathers, the popes, and fought very hard to suppress the Gnosticism. But we know that there is a reason why they wanted to suppress Gnosticism. Why? Because, of course, if you study Gnosticism very well, you know that it makes more sense than the theological construction taught by the church. And the church, of course, understood that Gnosticism is very closer to the ancient Egyptian doctrines where even the Bible concepts came from, right? So Neoplatonism is a teaching that came out of the traditions of Plato, Neoplatonism, and the founder of this branch of esoteric teaching or mystical teaching is called Plotinus. And what is Neoplatonism? The reinterpretation of Plato's teachings by Plotinus. And this introduced a new philosophical, religious, and mystical doctrine called Neoplatonism. Plotinus was an ardent student of Plato. Plato was an initiate in the ancient Egyptian mystery system, and a devoted student of ancient Egyptian priests. So even though the Europeans were copying this new concept, trying to feel that they were the ones who developed this concept, still they are acting from information they stole from ancient Africans. So Neoplatonism has nothing to do with the Greek people, has nothing to do with this guy, I think was probably the Roman, right? It came from the esoteric traditions of the Africans. How about the doctrines that Neoplatonism teaches, right? Neoplatonism is an idealistic and or existence monism. Its main doctrinal postulation is that the prime originator of all things is the One. The One is an undivided unity, nameless and transcendental. Everything emanates from the One in the following order. First come the news. Well, let me just break this down. According to the Neoplatonism of Plotinus, okay, everything came from the One. The Word emerged from the One. They didn't call him God. They say it's the One. His undivided unity is eternal, is self-made, self-preserving, uncreated creator, but they didn't use the word creator. They used the word emanate, like an outflow. Sometimes outflowing, like you pouring water on a bucket and then it begin to outflow, right? So from the One emanates the divine mind. And from the divine mind emanates, and there was another outflow of souls. And then from that, the universe, and then matter. So matter is the lowest in the scale of things, according to this philosophical doctrine. But if you study ancient African teaching, ancient Egyptian knowledge, you see that this was what the Egyptians only taught. This was what the Egyptians thought. So Neoplatonism, the bottom line is Neoplatonism has nothing to do with Greek or Plato. It has everything to do with ancient Africa, because we know that Plato went to Egypt to study. He was initiated into Egyptian mystery school. And then he got all his information from his theory from the ancient Africans, right? So the Gospel of St. John, when you see this, this is the idea again where the Gospel of St. John came from. In the beginning was the One. The One. It's everything came from the One. In the beginning was God. Even though they changed some ideas, but we all know where they took it from. The Gospel of St. John was purely full of Neoplatonic principles and teachings, and that Neoplatonism, of course, came from ancient Africa. So this is still African shit. Again, another tradition that came after the collapse of ancient Egyptian mystery system is called Hermeticism or Hermetism. What is Hermetism? An esoteric, magical, religious, spiritual, and philosophical tradition based on the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus. And if you watch one of my previous videos, I made it clear that Hermes Trismegistus, this name here is what Greek called the African god Thot, T-H-O-T, or Tahuti, Thot. So even though this is Greek, this is a Greek adaptation of an African god Thot. An African god Thot is the teacher of mankind. It's one who brought all sciences, taught mankind how to read, write, right? So many esoteric organizations follow the Hermetic tradition. When I say esoteric tradition, I'm talking about like the Western secret societies. They still borrow these ideas. And as I said, these ideas are what rules the world. That's how they control the world. That's how they control the minds of the people. Because many of our people shy away from this knowledge, from this information, and they continue to be dominated by other people imposing either Christianity on them or Islamism on them. So some of these secret societies, few of them, and there are many, hundreds of them. You see, Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Freemason, this is not freedom, it should be Freemason. Ordo Templis Orientis, which is Order of the Eastern Temple, and then Rosicrucians. So many secret societies in the Western society go by this Hermetic teachings, and it is this information from the Hermeticism that they practice, that they derive their traditions. And my point is that even Hermeticism came from Egyptian mystery school, from the Egyptian priests, or from African priests. So they borrowed it, burned down the library of Alexandra, and destroyed the information so that people wouldn't know where they get all this from. Right? How about Gnosticism? Another tradition that came out of Africa. Whenever you see this word, you know you're dealing with African things, and that's why they fight it so hard to destroy it. You see some African clergies following European ecclesiastical doctrines, saying all kinds of things about Gnosticism. But they studied Gnosticism from one point only, from the church's viewpoint. They have not studied it from an objective point of view and see what these people actually thought. We just told that they were teaching heretics, and we've ingrained that ideology into our mind and kind of biased the mind from actual objective investigation of who the Gnostics are and why the Roman-driven, Indo-European, Western-driven Christian traditions were so adamant in suppressing the Gnostics. There's a reason to that, because it's again something coming from Africa, something coming from ancient Egypt. So, what is Gnosticism? Gnosticism. It is a philosophical, religious, spiritual tradition with doctrinal viewpoint about gaining transcendental knowledge through gnosis. Gnosis means inner knowledge or intuition. The core teachings is that the material world is created by a demiurge. Demiurge in Greek language means the craftsman or Yedabor. The God of the Bible, according to the Gnostics, is an evil God. Is an evil God. He created the material world through hypostatization of higher spiritual realm. This word means mirroring. That the demiurge, according to the Gnostics, the God of the Bible is actually an evil God. And if you really read the Old Testament very well, you see that this God was like a lunatic. The God of the Old Testament was kind of a lunatic, kind of bipolar. You know, he would go to and command people to go and massacre the entire race of people, wipe them off, you know. And the same God who teaches you not to kill. It's very unpredictable. His temper is literally bipolar. Now, one moment he's happy, the other moment he's sad, and he's commanding to go and kill people. The Gnostics say it was not the original creator, it was not the prime creator, he made himself God and forced mankind to worship him, but he's not actually the true God. And that is why when you see him represented in different pictures, in different art forms, you see that he has a compass, you know, God bending down and creating the material world. with a compass. And that compass, again, is what the Freemasons, the square and the compass. And at the center of it is God, or the grand architect of the entire world. And when they say the grand architect, of course, they're talking of the demiurge. The demiurge. The demiurge is the evil creator of this third density material level, right? And the Gnostics believe that this material world is artificial, it's not real, it's an artificial construct, it's an illusion, right? And many philosophers, for those of you who study philosophy, will tell you that the physical perception, the physical material world is nothing but an illusion. And that is what quantum physics, the quantum science is beginning to discover at this modern time. And this is what ancient people have been saying over and over and over. And we all think that they are primitive, right? See, this is another representation of the grand architect or God creating the world. You see, he has Masonic, the Freemason, the Masonic compass, compass, using it to create the world. Because even if you read the Bible, they say that God came down like a craftsman, he used the dust of the earth. This is what craftsman does, right? He created man out of the dust of the earth, right? As they are representing this image. And the secret society that have been there for thousands of years, the Freemasons, have God, G, or the grand architect as their symbol. It's not by mistake, because this secret society has a lot of information. In fact, most of the Bibles were edited and written by these people, right? Now, African mystery school continues even in Islamic tradition. For example, the Sufism. The Sufism has an African origin. So, what is Sufism? Sufism is a mystical and ascetic Islam. It is known as Tasawwuf. I don't know if I'm saying this word right. Tasawwuf among Muslim practitioners. Followers of this aim at attaining mystical union with God through a chemical process. Sufism, which is practiced in Islamic religion, again came out of the traditions of Africa. So we have to know that these people have plagiarized and stolen all Africa things, even though they are coming to you, bringing you Christianity, bringing you Islam, and you buying and consuming these religions with no critical mind. You know that it is your thing that they are still bringing to you, but because you're not aware of it, it seems that other people are giving you something new. Because they burned your book, they burned your history, they destroyed every information that would have led you to understand where they took this thing from, right? They bring it to you and then you buy it. So Christianity was brought by the Westerners. No, everything they taught in Christianity already pre-existed in Egypt, right? Everything, every single thing. The death and resurrection, immaculate conception, all these things of 12 disciples, all these things were already contained in the African ancient Egyptian teaching. And that's why they have to make sure that they numb your consciousness. You never know where they take information from. This book is very good. Anyone who's interested in read, it's one of my recommendations. When I make recommendation of a book, it's because that book is good, right? Egyptian Mystic, Seekers of the Way by Mustafa Gadala. Don't mind my writing. This is not Gadala, but Gadala, Mustafa Gadala. He said, ancient Egypt is the origin of alchemy and present-day Islamic practice of Sufism. As I said, Sufism came from ancient Africa. So if you're a Muslim, you're thinking that Arabic people gave you something. No, it's something that was already yours as an African. They just blinded you. You didn't know it came from you. That spiritual tradition came out of the mystery system of Egypt. And that's why Egypt had to be destroyed, and the traditions and the mystery school has to be completely destroyed, and the remaining ones had to go on the ground. So Gadala said religiousness for the ancient Egyptians was total cosmic consciousness. The Egyptian concept is commonly known in the East as Sufism and in the West as alchemy. So whenever you see this word Sufism or alchemy, you know that they are talking of ancient African things they've stolen. So it's not something you should be, somebody should be giving you and you'll be so surprised about it, because it is your thing from the beginning. How about the Islamic tradition? Whenever you hear the Prophet Idris, I'm saying this as Africans, we know what they are being taught. You know that when they're teaching you some of these things, you know that it belonged to you from the original, from the beginning. Whenever you hear Prophet Idris in Islamic tradition, religious tradition, you know they are talking of the African god Thoth, because they plagiarize that concept. Prophet Idris is no other but the god Thoth or Tahuti, the same god that when the Greek people plagiarized him, they called him Hermes Trismegistus. If you're a theologian, you're doing hermeneutics. Hermeneutics came from Hermes Trismegistus, which again goes back to ancient African god Thoth or Tahuti. And I wrote here, in Islamic tradition, Idris was the first to invent the art of writing. He is the first to study the constellation and calculate the movement of the stars. Idris is the Egyptian Thoth. Again, this is the Egyptian Thoth. If you're a Muslim and you hear Prophet, and you're an African, and you hear the Arabic people are teaching you about Prophet Idris, you better go and study the original, the God Thoth. Even though they brainwash your mind to think that if you understand ancient Egypt, you're worshiping an idol. But that's how they corrupted your mind. But the same thing they packaged in a different, just in a different package, and give it to you, and you're excited. Go and study the original. The original is the God Thoth, who is the first to teach mankind the art of writing, to teach mankind the sciences. All sciences was brought by the God Thoth. In this case, if it's in Greek, plagiarized him and called him Hermes Trismegistus. The Islamic people plagiarized him and called him Prophet Idris. Right? How about in Hebrew religion? Still African shit is being taken. Kabbalah. Whenever you hear Kabbalah, Kabbalah is an esoteric Jewish mysticism based on thaumaturgy as well as theosophy. This word means the ability to perform miracles, to do something mysterious, to be able to do wonders, right? Kabbalah is a kind of mystical tradition of self-discipline, of esoteric knowledge, deep knowledge. We have to remember that these people who gave the world the three major religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, the people who actually control things don't follow this religion. The people who actually give these religions to people don't follow them, because they have another deeper knowledge they follow. And that deeper knowledge is actually where the meat lies. So you give people false religion so that people will not have power within themselves, they will not understand who they are, and they will follow blindly false teachings, and then they frighten people that if you begin to seek this deeper knowledge, you're evil or you're satanic, and that frightens the hell out of people. And it keeps people from actually seeking the truth, right? So my point is that whether you call it the Kabbalah, whether you call it Hermeticism, whether you call it Gnosticism, whether you call it Sufism, these traditions is traced back to ancient Africa. So it is not something that um, that people know, right? Because if people know them, instead of going to study Sufism, you should be looking back to Africa. You should be looking back to Egypt to study the God touch. Now, instead of following them in their secret societies and studying Hermeticism, you go back to the original and try to investigate the original. And this is exactly what they don't want you to know, because once you know it, they won't be able to control you, and that's why they have to hide true knowledge from you. I said I was not going to make this long. I'm going to be brief, but I don't know how long it is. But please subscribe to my channel. This is the Primordial Wave, and I am the Enwisdomizer. Watch out for the next video. Thank you for subscribing to my channel.